Overall outlay of the budget is expected to rupees 8 trillion with an expected fiscal deficit of 5.5 to 6% of GDP for fiscal year 22 compared to an estimated compared to the estimated deficit of 6% GDP during 21. The revenue collections target FBR has been set 5.8 trillion, which will be lower than the IMF's target of 6 trillion. The target seems to be ambitious as it is likely to be 23% higher compared to the estimated collection of 4.7 billion for the fiscal year 2021. Additional revenue measures worth rupees 350 billion also expected, and the non-tax collections target will set up at 1.42 trillion for the fiscal year 22. The government is expected to earmark 900 billion for federal PSDP, obviously an increase of 38% from the previous budget. A key element is total development outlay, which includes provincial spending. It is expected that the government will set a provincial spending target of 1 trillion, taking the total development expenditure to 1.9 trillion compared to the last budget of 1.3 trillion, up obviously over 44% more. Government likely to set a markup interest in defense expenditure target at 3.1 trillion and 1.4 trillion, up 4% and 9% respectively with respect to the last year budget. The government also intends to increase salaries, pension about 15 to 20%. The fiscal deficit expected around 2.9 trillion for fiscal year 22, which could be 5.6% of GDP. For subsidies, government is expected to set a target of 530 billion for fiscal year 22. The current account deficit for fiscal 22 is projected to about 2.3 billion, which would be less than 1% of the GDP. The cotton bales output expected for fiscal year 22 would be about 10.5 billion bales. Government also earmarked funds for COVID vaccine and about I think a total outlay of 250 million. I think these are some of the salient features of the budget. However, in my opinion, there are enormous challenges which are associated with the budget, which may be which may include the feasibility of these targets, the assumptions on which these targets are based, unrealistic tax target, petroleum problem, and debt, defense, and doles, etc. These are my some of the submissions which I think much relevant with the proposed finance bill. First of all, I request before Dr. Teek Zafar Saab, since Dr. Vakar from SDPI has to leave for a meeting to FBR. So before I hand over to Dr. Saab, I request Dr. Vakar, who is Joint Executive Director, Sustainable Development Institute of Pakistan, and always kind enough to join our sessions, to please give his opinion to what extent this budget, although this budget is obviously it's a more growth-oriented budget after covering the stabilization phase, which our economy was going on in the last 2 years. Dr. Vakar Saab, please.
I would
Thank
like
you.
to welcome Dr. Waqar, and it is always beneficial to hear him. So, inshallah, we'll benefit from his information and analysis.
Ji, Dr. Vakar.
Thank you, Dr. Atiq Saab. Thank you, Dr. Rashid Saab. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for your flexibility for allowing me to speak. I just have a couple of slides, if you allow me. I'll just share my screen, and do let me know if you can see these slides just as an agenda setting, which I think Dr. Rashid has done very ably. But I think taking lead from what he has said, uh, I think this year we are standing at a much more encouraging position when we are discussing budget. Last year's COVID budget was much more difficult under very uncertain, very challenging circumstances. But this year, of course, we see that economy has posted a growth rate of almost 4% compared to minus 0.5% previously. And all subsectors have contributed a very decent recovery, with agriculture growing by 2.8%, industry at 3.6, and services at 4.4, which is all very encouraging. Investment growth has also picked up this year on the back of decent credit facility by the central bank and the banking sector in general. Turf facility was, of course, given. Diaspora has also contributed to some portfolio investment lately. And I'm sure that Raja Amir Iqbal Saab is here. He'll talk more about the private sector perspectives. But from the investment side as well, we are looking at some good news. But having said this, some sectors in the economy are still facing a challenge, and one would like to really find out if those sectors can be helped through this year's fiscal policy or medium term fiscal policy, I would say. Most notably, for example, cotton is facing a minus 16% decline, mining is in negative, electricity and gas distribution is in negative, transport sector faced a lot of micro and smart lockdowns, transport sector is in negative. These are some large sectors which have posted negative growth rates, which still need to be helped through the fiscal policy. And as I said, we are comfortably placed to do this if, of course, we stay the course, given that external flows or external account is looking good on the back of an upward trend in exports and an upward trend in remittances. Uh, and I think even the revenue side of the government has shown very encouraging results. Despite of COVID-related challenges, FBR crossed 4 trillion revenue collection mark, which is very encouraging. But I think going forward, as Dr. Rashid Saab also said, the pressure on the expenditure side of the budget will still remain due to the need to sustain higher levels of social protection. We are going to see another round of SARS cash out. And there are some accrued expenditures in the form of circular debt in the energy sector or state-owned enterprise losses, which are still not sort of showing in the budget because these are accrued expenditures. But if you add them as well, the pressures on the expenditure side are quite large. Keeping this economic outlook in mind, I think the five big messages that come out from people who sort of work on the evidence side of the budget. First is that budget is not just about running the government. Budget is also about investing in people, livelihoods, and if I can encompass that into an all-encompassing concept, which is the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And the first